How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Elder Gonzalez here. Now, today, let's take a look now at another part of the AWS Services, which is the AC2, right? So I'm gonna make a quick recap of how do I get here. So first is by looking at the AWS Services. There is a course taught by Stefan Marek. Is a data, and I think this is quite interesting. Data analysts, big data engineers, and then developers. In my case, look at this shift. I start as a developer, all right, that moves its attention to a data engineer and data analyst, right? Because especially if you're building any applications, heavily any data-driven applications, you as a developer, as a software engineer, you also need to understand what you're going to build. What is the business at the end of the day, right? So what is you essentially need to be a subject matter in that. And this is why I starting to look at the AWS certifications as a way to understand and have the ability to map all of these different services that if a particular company needs to use them, tell them what to do and how to do that, and if that is convenient or not. All right. So because AWS, Azure, and the cloud of Google, all of them provide now these infrastructures as a service, so you don't have to worry about managing your own servers and anything that is involved in that, right? So this layer of abstractions that software engineering is well known about it is happening in this domain. So instead of you, for example, having to worry about what is the hardware that you need to buy in terms of computer power, the CPU, the memory, and if you rely on other peripherals, whether it's graphic cards or some other input and output devices, whether it's network cards or audio cards, particularly these four, right? Because remember, all that you want to do is to set up a server, right? So also you need to know is, well, I need to hire is a particularly ISP for internet connections. And also, what is the cable that I need to plug into my physical device, right? Whether it's an Ethernet or which kind of Ethernet cable do I need to, because now you have to worry about is the data transfer. This is only in the physical realm, right? And I mentioned is roughly what are the basic stuff that you need to, and then now is the software part. So what is the OS that you want to install? If this OS now support is access to harness the full power of CPU, GPU, and all of this peripheral, and if this software or this OS allows you to have now recurrent security updates, okay, whether this is Windows or Linux, if this now, what is the governance license that this OS has, right? If this is closed, it is have a closed proprietary license or an open source license. Which kind of open source license is it? An MIT or is it an Apache? Can I make use of commercial? Can I use it commercially? And another is once you install the OS, what are the applications that needs to live inside of this? server, right? And what are the different projects that I can install here in my app in the computer. So whether it is the if I'm building a web applications, what is the front end and the back end? I'm going to build also a mobile application. I want to host there as well. And now it comes to how you're going to develop those applications. What are the applications that you're going to build? All right. What are the technology you're going to rely on? What are the decisions that decisions needed to build those applications in terms of the technology, the folder structures, the design patterns that you might need to go with, and also is defining is what is the business logic that these applications will handle. So all of this, all of this, plus the security aspect, is something that now AWS say, hey, I'm going to offer you this convenience. I'm going to offer you as a service this management, so you don't have to worry about that. That might be quite simple and convenient to go with. Most of the things that we do are because they are convenience and make things easy, quote quote easy for us. But there is a trade-off, right? And that is that you need to know is how you're going to handle your infrastructure, your servers, hardware and software. And also on top of that is how you're gonna handle is the business logic. This is what you have now a dedicated team take care of that. And because now as the industry push to this area in which you can be your own with the things of vibe codings and all of this convenient stuff of service providers that they give us is infrastructure as a service. So now it has become much more convenient to develop our own applications, right? So you will see now more single founders that as long as they have the technical knowledge, they will do that as it is. And this is the natural step of things, you know? It's like now you are going to do a lot with less. So, in other words, this is the reason why I'm actually looking at this, or in any case, this is the reason why I'm actually looking at this certification. To understand now is this, how do I get here, and take a look at a little bit of history of the AWS as well, right? So here we're going to cover, before going into that, in this series of videos, we're gonna cover is over 30 services, all right? So AWS and IT beginners are welcome. So I am one of those. Okay, there is some other certifications with the AWS, which is the solution architect, but I don't need to worry about that. But what are but these different services I'm going to look is you can think of this like several buckets. So one of them is computing, storage, security, authentications, firewall, and again I'm just mentioning is the basic buckets, right? Because there is over 30 services, right? Or well, I'm not going to look at all of them, but what I do want to look is AWS Identity and Access Management. This is one. Amazon EC2, the basics, and then Amazon EC2, the instant storage. Okay, this is another one. High availability and scalability. This is also part of the EC2. RDS. What the French does is RDS. RDS. RDS, Amazon or AWS. Relational databases. Okay. Just So do we have here, for example, this the Redshift, AWS, right? It's a fully managed cloud data warehouse service from AWS designed for large-scale data analysis. Interesting. It's a data warehouse. Okay. That's also interesting. It's a data warehouse. This is when business analytics kicks in. Data warehouse. Okay. En Spanish es un galpón de datos. Okay. Data warehouse. Exactly. For design for large scale data analysis here. Data warehouse. That is a very mind-bending and interesting stuff here. Data warehouse. What are the data warehouse examples? Oh, this is where the business is, bro. Snowflake. That makes a lot of sense why he works there. Okay, Snowflake, Amazon Redshift, Google BigQuery, and Azure Synapse. This, oh, holy hell. Oh, holy moly. Okay, all right. Okay, okay, okay. I, well, I actually, that makes a lot of sense. I'm saying all of that, right? It's because, so I'm saying all of this. Yeah, I'm saying all of this because now I started to understand is what is the business where I am, of course, which is despite of UIs and backends, is also to manage data and to keep guard that S, right? That French toast stuff. So again, first we're gonna look at the getting started with AWS. The AWS the identity access management. The other is the EC2, the basics, the storage, and the availability and scalability. Then the relationals databases. So with Aurora and Elastic Cache, right? I don't know why it isn't put here, but I do think this must be here. Amazon Route for DNS, VPC, Amazon Route for DNS routing, VPC, Amazon S3 to store emails and assets. This is different from a database. The AWS CLI, SDKM roles and policies. But I do think this is not quite well organized. Yeah, 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 this is not quite well organized. Okay, interesting. No, it is, it is, it is. And then after that, yeah, let me do that again. Let me do that again. Okay, you got it. Okay, so first is the authentications. So the IAM, then the Amazon EC2, the computational power, the storage, the availability and scalability of this computational power, then the databases with RDS, Aurora, and Elastic Cache. Then how you going? Then the bookkeeping of your web application via DNS, all right? Then the VPC, which is the virtual private cloud It allows you to access all of these um, formations of data. Mm-hmm. Then you have is the S3 to store image and assets, image and videos, right? The Amazon S3 advanced security, all right? The CloudFront for edge caching is another services, containering in AWS, Elastic Beanstalk and Cloud Formation, integration and messaging, AWS monitoring, and AWS Lambda, right? So 8 so far. Amazon DynamoDB, Amazon API Gateway, the CI/CD pipeline, the server application model, the serverless application model, the AWS Cloud Development Kit, the Amazon Cognito, other serverless, advanced identity in AWS, advanced identity in AWS, and AWS security and encryption. So roughly 14, no, there are 14 services here. But all of this is just to be aware. So this is the vast majority of services that you need to be aware of, right? It's also including is messaging here. Okay, okay. Holy moly! All right. So yeah. So first we start with the IAM. Okay. This IAM, I do think that you can actually take a look at that. In fact, let me do this. Let me do this. I'll be. All right, and we're back. Okay. So here we are. Let me actually show the AWS certification. The AWS Certified Developer Associate. DK. Okay. And this is it. Okay. So this is all of these services that we're gonna cover in this course. So you can put in a bucket. So you can label them based by the computing or the searching capabilities or the storage and relational databases, the messaging services. Okay. The messaging service to communicate across different instances of your applications, the security, okay, API gateway, and so on and so forth, and the management as well as the access to. So here, based on the color here, you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Auto scaling, no, it's 9. There are 9. So 9 buckets here. So this is what we're going to do, navigating the AWS spaghetti ball as expected. So I already created an account in AWS, and I see what are the things that they require you to do. First, give me your credit card, and second, your phone registration. So once that's done, hey, good. Exploring, navigating in the console admin dashboard. So get myself familiar with where things are located. All right. Troubleshooting delays in account activations here. And now, finally, to a little bit of history of AWS, right? To understand that how do I get here, right? So it all started in 2002, and if you remember, for those who can remember, or if you are interested in a little bit of history, in 2001, right? There was the bubble crash, the tech bubble crash, where back then a lot of this innovation that come out with the internet and all of these kind of services and applications and so on and so forth, that revolutionizing even your sex life, you know, uh, now they burst. So the bubble bursts. And then, well, now companies actually have to see what is the true value that is in this industry, especially on the internet. All right. So this is why now companies like Amazon and among others, they slowly see what is the business here, what are the things that are valuable, that people are willing to pay for. And this is one of this also describe the history of capitalism, right? Uh, I'm not gonna dive deep into that, but what I do think that is relevant for this is that because all of this money that comes by banks and people asking loans, and I'm talking about is the founders and group of people that they are asking loans to banks to actually finance this endeavor, right? But they don't have too much idea of where the thing is going. And this is crucial to understand if you want to, if you want to. But as an employee and someone that I also offer my services as a freelancing, uh, I saw that, and it's like I saw is in the founder's eye. Sometimes I work for several of them. It's like they don't have idea of what is this first, and second is that if they do, uh, they don't know how to do that, right? And it boils down to, hey, they taking his all of his money with this idea, but they don't know if this actually is this is valuable, right? If this gonna work. So that's why they hire me to actually see if this actually can move and generate wealth, all right? But that's the core things of all of this, right? And there is a lot of people that taking loans, right, and hire other folks to do specific stuff to see if this where the thing is going, right? So I need you to do this and this and this and that, right? And if that doesn't work, well, we need to pivot and ask more money to other investors and so on and so forth. There is nothing wrong with that, right? But what I see that is not working is that if you are not true about it, at least for the those who truly wants to understand what they are doing, why they are getting paid for, you know, to truly understand that. For those individuals, uh, it is very important to choose where you want to go and who you want to offer your service and for what. And this is also this is what most escorts knows very well. And I know that that might sound quite and I know that might sounds very weird, but escorts knows that very well because they have to deal with the client directly, right? And all of this kinky and fucked up French toast behavior that it might have and desires, right? So it's actually tuning in what is that these clients actually truly want. And eventually, if you're in any industry, you are, if you dedicate enough time to in that industry, you eventually will become is a philosopher, a thinker, somebody that wants to understand the truth of this, the truth of the nature of affairs. And so yes, because of that, all right. So now, this is why I'm actually when I'm going to offer my services and understand why my offering is this, I starting to analyze my clients' behaviors and psyches, bro, to see, what do you want, where do you want, and where can we pivot, and for how long can I be with you? You know, can I trust you? Can you do the thing? Uh, in any case, again, this is also go for both party, right? This is not for the employee, but also for the employer. For the employer, but also for the employee, right? And again, you're not dealing is with label. You're dealing is with people. In any case, so all of that, right? It's just because after the bubble burst in 2001, right? So companies that have now acquired by founders and investors a huge amount of money and loans, usually debt, right? Now they are scared to where they need to pivot, right? So that's why there's massive layouts and occurs and so on and so forth, because now they're the thing that they thought that will be innovated or cool, whatever it is we're gonna call it, it turns out that it is very hard to implement, or the people they hire, they don't have the devotion of that idea, because they mainly don't believe that. And this is when now, and I know that might sound quite, hey Euler, isn't this a course about AWS? And I say, yes it is, but because in order to understand all of these different services we're going to provide and yada yada, right? It is important to understand how do we get here, and that is by looking at the 2001 and what happens then, and how the thing started to actually repeat over and over and over, or the history rhymed. So that back in 2001, right? So a lot of people in the late 90s, in the early 90s, when JavaScript and HTML and CSS actually come up here to revolutionize your even sex life, so on and so forth. So a lot of these people that actually took loans, massive loans, they actually is making and building products. So they don't have idea if those products actually will be validated by the market, but they have now an idea. And again, people that this is when things get that this is when things this is when this is when now companies have to create all of these ceremonies and stuff like that in order to move or push all of these people into one direction. And it is up to those people to decide what are the truly, so why they are there, right? Despite the money, because money is of course is important, don't get me wrong, but if you're only there in that industry for the money, which is not there's nothing wrong about it, I do think that that's quite boring. And there is and I don't say that, I just observe is the nature of affairs, and that is if you do these things over and over and over and over, right? Whether it is this, if you're building here is user interface, or if you're building, like for example in this case this one, right? Or if you're building is how you pull data from a database and now pass through some data pipelines to send that to the user interface, so now the users can see that. If you do that for 7 months to 18 months, or even 30 and 40 years, that becomes quite monotonous and tedious, bro, right? And I get it why a lot of people actually in, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter or any of these social media, so they are they are they are telling that, hey, this is not what I wanted, and this is not what I wanted because you now only exclusively want is money. There's nothing wrong with that, but again, it's not sustainable. And this is something that you don't take me don't take my word, don't take my word. Go out and experience that for yourself. What this is the reason why I'm actually recording this kind of videos, right? Because I'm not going to be a AWS certified cloud, an AWS certified developer associate for 10, 20 years. That's not how things works. We are in constant evolution, and in this industry, actually, like it or not, push you in that direction, in the direction of change, in the direction of, hey, can you do this? Are you willing to do that? Uh, this is the nature. This is the nature of business. So in any case, I don't wanna lose track in take another segue here. The TLDR is that Amazon, back in 2001, when the tech bubble burst, where huge amount of people back then, whether it's investors and leaders, CEOs and founders, they took a lot of this money and ideas to figuring out how to get them rich. Okay, usually, right? Margins is important, yada yada yada. But some of them realized that the hard truth of this, that no matter how many founding series you pass through, all right, and at the end of the day, if that product doesn't provide if that product doesn't make it its promise, it'll be impossible for that product to survive. So what you can do is to cash out from that failure endeavor, and those who doesn't know what they're doing, then now is binding to a never-ending cycle of jumping to one job to another, to another, to another, so on and so forth, right? Not knowing what the French toast they're doing and why they're doing the thing that needs to be done. This is a very solo endeavor. There is no group here. There is no amount of kumbaya that you can say to try to make other peoples to work in that direction to discover the truth of affair in that particular domain and business. It is up to them. And because this is something that is so small, there is no so the amount of leaders or the amount of people that have this vision or mindset or the desire, the desperations to know about the truth is that is so French toast small, it is so minute that I honestly don't care about what the masses think about this, because this at the end of the day is a solo game. This is the truth of this. So now, with that huge overview, all right, of the 2001, the bubble burst, and now companies starting to cut spending, fire people, of course, and now pivot to where is they need to go, right? So what is the business here? What is the place that we need to still have to go in to mining, all right? And what is the value of this? So now, Amazon, smart, in a very clear way, right? They say, hey, they started to develop this particular tool in 2002, these internal tools of how they're going to now have all of these different services, right? How they can now is label is different computations and storage that they can provide to their clients. And now in 2003, Amazon infrastructure is one of its core strengths idea to the market. So they now realize that, hey, the business here is not on offering web pages to clients, right? Or offering e-commerce and all that kind of stuff. The real deal here is that we are going to offer them is an infrastructure. And because they were the pioneers of thinking that, so anytime that there is something, anytime that something's happened on the internet, right? So it affect hundreds of thousands of business, right? So we recently in 2025, December and November 2025, at the current date here, Amazon Services and also Cloudflare, which is another competitor in this landscape. So when something goes wrong, there was a misconfiguration in Cloudflare services made by one of the developers, and that actually crashed the internet. So you can have access to a lot of these services, okay, and now people panic, okay. Again, this was just for a couple hours, but even though the people panic, okay, people panic about it because most of the wealth that they think they have is they don't have it. It's virtual, it is ethereal, it's not in the elementary table, right? Or how do you say that? Right? It's not there. Periodic table of element, exactly. It's not on the table of element. Of the element. Periodic, it's not in the periodic table. Exactly. Periodic table, you know? It's not in the periodic table. It's ephemeral. It's like, it doesn't exist. And this is also something that is happening here in Argentina, right? Where there is a lot of people that now are receiving his funds, and once they receive that money from their bank account, they put all of their oh shit, they put all of this money, oh crap, okay, they're putting all of this, oh shit, they're putting all of this money, oh my god, yeah, I think that this is what needs to be done. They're putting all of this money here. God damn. Yeah. So yeah, they're putting all of this money here. Okay. In. There is something weird that happened, by the way, right now in Argentina 2025. December 2025. Right now is 19 December 2025. So a lot of these fintechs, they have lowered its yield, monthly yields, from almost 10%. You might think, hey, this is a lot, this is too much. It's considerable, right? Argentina standard is quite considerable, because what happens if those, in all of these people are putting all of this money into these fintechs, but if there is a massive round of if there is a massive round for these users to pull out their money out of those fintechs, they don't have, so I don't have, they have the liquidity enough to make that happen, right? So this is part of the capitalist layer. On top of that, another one, again, this is not part. This is not part of the AWS services. No. So, but in any case, here we are with the 2002 that they internally launched this is services, and then in 2003 they say no. The real deal here is that we're going to provide this infrastructure, right? And now in 2004 they launched this SQS. I'm not quite familiar with these services. It stands for service SQS, meaning is service or simple queue service. Okay, a fully managed message queuing service provided by AWS. It enabled the decoupling and scaling of distributed system, microservice, and serverless application by allowing software components to communicate asynchronously through message queue. All right. So this SQS is allow you to have is different applications hosted and fully managed in their infrastructures. And they now handle is the scaling of this application, the scaling of these applications, and the asynchronous communications that happen here. Okay, all right. Simple queue service. Okay, simple queue services. Interesting. And then in 2006, they now relaunch publicly is the SQS, S3, and EC2. So they're now figuring out that computational power and so offering service, so offering is computational power and services, computational power and storage, as well as the communications across or the system that allows the communication across all of these applications hosted in their service. It is a big deal. It is the business here. Now this is in 2006. I was in 2006. What? I had 16 years old. Holy fuck. Yeah, I had 16 years old. I was back in high school, and in 2007 now they expand to other geographies. So now a lot of this application makes a lot of sense. Airbnb, Netflix, and Dropbox. Now they are hosted by AWS Services. So Gartner is a multinational IT consulting firms that have several reports. One of them is the Corner Magic Quadrants that show is the leading here, right? That show is what are the leading and the niche in that industry, right? In that market. So in 2023, AWS has a 90 billion annual revenue. AWS accounted for 31% of the market in Q1 in 2024. Right now, that has changed to 29, something like that. Let me see if I can link that. Yeah, I think let me do this here. Gartner Magic Quadrant, so AWS, right? I'm not sure if this in October, there you got it, but this was AWS named as a leader in 2025 for strategic cloud platform service for 15 years in a row. Holy shit. There's a lot of nasty stuff that you have to do that. This was August 15. Chani Yum, but they don't mention is the percentage here, right? Yeah, they don't mention the percentage. Because this is okay. No, I'm looking at the Garner. 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 Yeah, but it is it. AWS name as a leader. Yeah, but where is the paper, my friend? AWS, but what is the Garner? Infrastructure as a service. Is this the paper here? Ah, damn. That's what. Oh my god. Gartner Quadrant ERP, and they all now quote themselves. Okay. Okay, they all quote themselves. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, but they all. Okay. Okay. All right. Don't you have this? Yeah, because all of this. Okay. All right. Gartner Magic Quadrant. 2025 infra. Gartner Magic Quadrant. Okay, exactly. So the visionaries, the leaders, the challengers, and niche players. So this is the overview. But what if I want to look at that? No? Can you? Oh, do I need to? Oh, okay. Okay, I need to. Okay, they are. It is behind a paywall. Okay, no problem. No problem. Not at all. But in any case, is this right? That has changed a little bit, but they still remain is the leading company, because now their AWS cloud services are are not exclusively to the IT companies, and at the end of the day, everybody will be an IT company. But AWS enables you to build sophisticated and scalable applications applicable to a diverse set of industry. So the entertainment, enterprise, and IT, big data analysis, web hosting, mobile and social apps, and gaming. And they now set their own infrastructure, and this is the anatomy of this. So the AWS global infrastructure is AWS regions, availability zones, regions, availability zones, edge caching or data centers, and edge locations or point of presence here. But is that right? So regions, availability zones. Okay. So regions. So regions, availability zones. Edge caching, data centers. Okay. Well, availability zones and data centers is closely related, but it's regions, availability zones in data centers, and now edge locations or points of presence, right? So AWS regions is a cluster of services or a cluster of data centers, right? You can access to these regions, and how to use this region is based on 3 and 4 stop here. So they say the compliance. Hey, is the application that I'm gonna build when I use this service? Those are now legal. So those are those are legal compliance in that region. All right. so my data won't leave the region. Here in Argentina, it's South America, man. It's South America. It's South America. Anyway, but this is compliant, right? This is compliant. The other is proximity. Hey, how close those services are to my users. The other is the availability of those services. Okay, because not all regions have access to some edge bleeding technologies, right? So for example, you don't want to expose is the latest AI model to well, Asia regions or China or areas that are not aligned to US interests. Okay, and the other is pricing. So all of these different regions, because they are now data centers, and those data centers, some which is physical devices, right? So some regions are more expensive than other, and it's because how much does it cost to set those data centers, right? And anything that is involved there. So to purchase the asset, to purchase the hardware, the legal license that the hardware and software has, and also is the labor cost of putting all of that and providing maintenance and the maintenance around the data centers. So, and also is if that particular region have to pay more taxes. Okay, and those availability zones, right, that are usually have is 3. Sometimes you might have 6, but which is the max. But usually you have is 3, right? So they are now physical facilities that they are interconnected via a high throughput, via high bandwidth and ultra low latency networking, and isolated from disasters. That makes a lot of sense. And this point of presence, which is something that we're gonna see that later here. So now I am getting myself familiar with the tour of AWS console. All right, so where are the things that we need to look? Where are the services? How you can search for those services? What are the options or the settings of those services? Right? Some services some services might be global. That is more an exception than the rule. So, for example, IAM is a global services. S3 is another one. CloudFront is another one, the CDN, and the other is the Web Application Firewall. But most AWS services are region scope, EC2, so the computation power, the storage, Lambda functions, recognitions. So, all of that was the huge overview of the infrastructure. Okay, so the AWS infrastructure and why they actually decides to be there, because back in 2003 they see the business here, and that is the business here. Okay, and in order to create that, they now organize stuff in this way. Hey, we have now regions, we have now availability zones, we have now data centers that live inside of those availability zones. I also explore a closest region via Google Maps on Sao Paulo. That's quite interesting, by the way. Absolutely. What's the other one? Uh, the edge locations, right? In how you select your regions. So based on the compliance, the proximity, and based on the compliance, the proximity, and the availability of those services, and the pricing. as well, and also the edge locations, okay, and the points of presence. So now, finally, I have, so I am here, right? No pun intended. So this IAM, right? Because the TLDR of this is a global services that allow the root, that allow the admins offer is credentials for these users to navigate is their own infrastructure, their own customer infrastructure, aka their own set of services they have available for their web application, for example, right? Or mobile gaming, or on the IT industry, you know. But for that application, right? This is the service that they have. So this client has. So this client now can offer access to new team members, developers, business analysts, so the business folks, IT, sales, marketing, right? So they can have access to these services and work with them. Now, and work with them. So the AWS here with IAM, right? Offer this services, right? So the admin now allowed, so the admin the root account, all right, of that customer. So the admin account for, so the admin account of that customers now can provide credentials to users, so they can have access to their own infrastructure. So via the IAM, and I do think this is quite interesting to take notes out of this, right? So the admin customer account, or the root admin, or the root account, okay, the admin customer account or the root account can provide access to others. Yeah, can provide access to their so yeah, the admin customer client can provide access to their, yeah. The admin customer account can provide access to their client, or the admin client account, okay, the admin client's accounts can provide access to their infrastructure, to the client infrastructure, to, yeah, can provide access to the client's infrastructures to sales, business, data analyst, IT, or any other member at the company. Okay, that's the whole point of this, right? So the admin client's account, the root account, can provide access to their, yeah, can provide access to the clients. So can provide access to the client's infrastructures, to the sales, IT, business, data analysts, CEOs, or any other member of the company. Okay? Or any other member in the company. Or any other member in the company. Exactly. That's the whole point of the IAM, right? So now I as the root account, I as the admin account, I as the admin account, as the I as the admin client's account, the root account, I can provide access to the client's infrastructure, whether to the client infrastructure, aka to the computations, to the storage, to the data analysis, to the databases, to the security services, the messaging services, so on and so forth. To sell business to the to members in the company. Okay, exactly. So two members of the company, whether it's to sales, data analysis, IT, the CEO, the VPs, the shareholders, you name it, right? Okay. So to do so, now AWS has a particular way to define the access. So whether it's per user or per group, right? So users are now exactly. So you have now the root account, you have the users, you have the groups, okay? And you also have now the roles here. So those permissions are defined as a JSON. In this, the anatomy of this JSON is describing as a version, and inside of that is the statements, aka what are the different services that this account can have access based on an effect. Exactly. Based on an effect, all right, which is, hey, are you allowed or not? So based on an effect, and the actions which describe is the specific and an actions of that services of an action of that service and the resource it can have to. So that's the anatomy of this. Okay. Holy hell. I'll be right back. And we're back. All right. So, after that huge overview of what the AWS infrastructure is, and the reason of why we're looking at this is because back in 2002, after the bubble burst, the tech bubble burst, because now a lot of investors and shareholders, they take a lot of loan from banks to invest here in this new landscape on the internet, right? That it promised you to, it's going to solve even your sex life, right? But it turns out that that was not the case. And it's interesting because anytime in history that something new emerged, a technique, a product, or something, right? There's a lot of hype, and after that hype went past, or that bubble burst, now we're going to see what are the things that are value here. And Amazon, that initially started as a bookshelf for as an online bookshelf, right? Then it moved to, or then it have to pivot to what the business is, what the value of this thing called the internet actually promotes, and they recognize in 2002, after developing an internal tools for their own services, right? Whether it's for the database and the computing, storage, that it was about the infrastructure that they're going to dominate this. And this is interesting. Most of leaders are so the vision of the leader is to do something that nobody else is capable of looking or doing, because they don't have perhaps the clarity of what needs to be done. All right. And that is, in 2002, as I mentioned before, well, Amazon now have that their business model, or the idea, the business idea here is the infrastructure. So that's why in 2004, in 2003, they come out with this SQS as the first services that they provide. So now you have several of these applications that live on their on-premise or the physical server, all right? And because they can now live in different servers geographically sparse across the US. So now how you can make all of these different applications to communicate with other applications. So for example, if your hosting is a bookshelf store, right? So how you can now is communicate to a database, right, that holds, for example, books, and another users, and another is transactions, and so on and so forth, right? So this is known as the SQS, the simple queue service. And then a year later, they come up with another set of services. This is the AEC2, which is providing computing power, and S3, the storage, right? And then in 2007, so now the marketing team wants to expand to Europe, right? So applications like Airbnb, Heroku, and Netflix, right? All of them are run on top of the AWS services. And then is when other competitors kicks in here. So for example, like Microsoft with Azure's and Google as well, right? But the whole idea is that this is something that is not going to go away, because now the convenience is that all of these servers are managed by a dedicated team, where you only focus is on building this kind of applications. So you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about the hardware budgets and the technical spec that you need to buy to serve that capacity that your business have, right? AKA, so you need to buy is the motherboard and the CPU. So I choose is the specific CPU that is relevant for that applications to handle, or the memory RAM. If you need some other peripherals, so input and outputs, whether it's graphical some GPUs or high bandwidth, all right, via Ethernet, which is a cable that you use to actually connect physically to machines. And this is just only on the physical aspect. And then you go now on the software, which is what is the license that allow us to run these applications without having to worry about its costs, and that are permissive, right? Whether it's closed license or open source license. So what are the software that we can run here, okay? And how we now set up the applications inside of this OS, all right? And to make things much more secure, how now Amazon uses something known as the virtual machines, where instead of you now sharing is the same memory across different clients, you have now an isolated place where you're going to run your OS and the applications on top of that, right? So there is no sharing memory across. So you're not sharing the same space in memory with other clients. So this is only talking about the OS layer, and then on top of that is what are the services that you as a client that is going to provide your services choose to go with and allowed to have access to any of this business team or any of the business or the any of the corporate corporate members, right? So whether it's for sales or the so for any of these different corporate department. So whether it's for sales, the IT, the marketing, the finance, the operations, also for CEOs, of course, the shareholders, if you want to have that, the VPs across different divisions, and so on and so forth, right? So now, all right, this is the reason why we are looking at the AWS, and then say, all right, this is the structure. So we're focusing on regions. We also look at how can we choose the regions, and it is based on legal compliance, because your applications, wherever wherever you host that, they must comply to those geographic and state-related legal tenders. So the compliance, the the compliance, the proximity, if those servers are available, and the pricing, because it's not the same cost for US hardware, right? When they can now purchase a lot of these high power end devices and arrange them in different data centers, all right? Than in, for example, Sao Paulo or in Argentina when they don't have any regions there, or in some part of South Africa or in the middle of Africa, right? So the cost is quite, of course, different due a lot of the things that I mentioned before. Hey, the compliance, there's no government stability. The proximity is quite hard to serve that. It's not also feasible in terms of financial slant. And the cost is high, and not all of those services can be allowed are available for that region. One of them is for the for legal and compliance, and also for if those services are aligned to the U.S. interests, right? So you might not expose some of your AI latest models to Chinese, for example, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now, then I also look at another component of the infrastructure, which is the data centers in itself, which is a cluster of services that now allow you to have availability zones, which is usually 3, and they can be up to 6, where now each one of them representing is a facility that you can select with high network connectivity and ultra low latency. There also was a very interesting topic that happened in Amazon, by the way, where they detect that one of their employees comes from North Korea due the latency, the keystroke latency. It takes about usually is 100 milliseconds, and that took about like seconds, something like that. So the difference, so they spot the difference and say, "Oh, no, who are you, bro?" Yes. So this is exactly what the AWS has shown to be very, very successful, because now they focus is on the infrastructure, and second is on the specialized force to do this, right? That's why they hire a lot of people. So from operations, from network security, applications developers, software engineering, finance, you name it. All right. And so the other is to look at the yeah, to look at the, so it's the infrastructure, okay? I just recap here. It's the infrastructure. And this infrastructure is about the regions, it's about the data centers and the available zones, and also is the edge locations or point of contact, something like that. And again, something that I'm going to see that later on. But what I really care in this video is to make a quick recap of the AWS IAM, one of the services. I went through, look at, get myself familiar with the admin dashboard, the dashboard in itself, to look up the services, and then how can I search from them. And once I pick one, it showed me the settings, the sidebar, with all of it showed me the settings, and what are the options that I can go with, right? And how some of those services are globally available. For example, IAM makes sense. So IAM, the S3 or the Route 53 for DNS, the CloudFront, as well as the firewall. But most of the time, most services are region based, and it makes a ton of sense. So IAM is one of those services. So here it allows you to now, as a client of Amazon, that you want to host all of that you want to select and that you want to use the Amazon infrastructure to build your own applications. And by having your own admin accounts, aka the root accounts, to provide access to different members in your company. So whether it's the IT or sales, finance, operations, marketing, you name it. Okay. Now, that's quite interesting, very very interesting. So the way how you can do that in IAM is by defining some users or groups, right? And each one of those users allows you to define some policy in a JSON-like objects. And the anatomy of this is, hey, this is the version and the set of statements that this user allowed to access to. So based on an action that describes it, this is allowed to not or not to have so based on an effect, which is allow you to access to this particular resource based on an actions, okay? So you can describe is the resource that you can have access and the actions that you can go with. So in any case, this specific records is describing is what are the resources that you can have access from. So what are the actions that you can have access to a specific resource? Yeah, it's pretty much that. So what are the access that you have? What are the access you can have to a specific resource? Okay, and you can define several of those policies. Okay. So that's quite revealing, right? In terms of how you can now create your own policies and what those policies represent as piece of information. So I also look at how I can create now a users, all right, and groups, and how you can bind now is permissions to users and groups. All right, you can combine is a group with other groups. That's not allowed. And how you can create this user here. So first you define is the user. It allows you to define the passwords, okay? And to after you generate a user to reinsert their own password, okay? Or to regenerate is a new password, okay? Define the policies, right? As you can see, define the policies of the permissions, then review your changes, and then now reset your account. So this is to creating is now a user here. And if you want to create now a group, again, you look at the admin dashboard, take a look at that, and this allows you to create that and set the policies for that specific group. All right. So it's not that hard, by the way. You can create that user groups there. All right. And because when you trying to sign in here, right? I also look at the different policies here, right? The IAM policies. It's not describing here exactly. The policy structures, exactly. So the policy structure, as I mentioned, this is the statements that is now organized here, and it is important for those users to set up the, for security reasons, we need for those users to follow these guidelines, right? One of them is or these different strategies here, this defense mechanism. So one is password policy, all right? So you define some certain rules to apply to. The other is the multi-factor authentication. And I want to hit a break here because that's something that to me is quite important, regardless if you are a developer or somebody in the IT or is CEO, somebody that is on high performance here. Because your assets are at risk, your access as well. So this MFA is another strategy, it's a defense strategy that it combines is something that you know with something that you own. A password plus a device, all right? An MFA device. So because of this, right? So this is, since we have this strategy, this defense mechanism strategy, okay? AWS provide you access with different MFA methods. So whether it's by virtual access, I am quite familiar with this, known as TOTP, right? Time-based time-based one-time password, okay? It's actually follow a spec and a white paper, so on and so forth. You have the virtual MFA, the UTF, the universal second factor of the security keys, okay, which is now a hardware device that is going to store some information. Some of them might already have that data stored in the firmware, so you can only write once, all right, or via a specific software, right? And then you have now the hardware key fob for MFA device. Again, something that I am not quite familiar with. I do think this is something that allows you to generate your own key here. Let me actually explore this. What the French toast is this? Because I am not quite familiar. Hardware key fob. So, hardware key fob MFA meaning. All right. What are the key fob and do they improve security? There you go. It's this one. A key fob is a small programmable device that provides access to a physical object, also known as hardware tokens. A key fob provides on-device one-factor authentication to facilitate access to a system or device, such as car, computer system, restricted area, or rooms, mobile device, network services, or other kind of keyless entry systems. With a key fob, the user does not have to unlock the device with a real key, as with manual locks. In addition to provide remote-enabled access, the key fob is more convenient and more secure. Key fobs are among a class of physical security token that includes smart cards, proximity cards, and biometric keyless entry fobs. Why they call fobs? How a key fob works. A key fob contains a short-range radio transmitter frequency identifiers. It is used, which is something that your credit card actually powers that, right? So uh, when you when you approach to a POS, okay, point of sale, exactly. So when you approach your key card to a POS, a point of sales, what happened is that POS is emitting energy or electromagnetic energy that now powers up the key to generate and issue a one-time password. That is a very mind-bending stuff, and that's something that goes beyond the scope of today's video. But I do think that's quite revealing. Absolutely. Which is something that happened here. A key fob contains a short-range radio transmitter radio frequency identifications, chip and antenna. It uses radio frequency to send a distinct code signal to a receiver unit in the device. This receiver also contains an RFID tag, which is some form of stored information. The reader's transmitter sends a signal to the fob, which then adjusts to the transmitter frequency. The communication between the fob, what the French stuff is the fob, and what they call fob? Why they call fob, key fob? To describe a decorative ornament or chain attached to a pocket. The word fob itself is believed to come from the Low German dialect from Fub, meaning pocket. Over time, the term expanded to describe any small object such as charm or trinket. A charm or trinket attached to a keychain. Trinket. What the French stuff is a trinket? Yeah, what the French stuff is a trinket, bro? A knife, a cutting tool. Oh, a small ornament or jewelry. Trinket. How do you say that in Spanish? In Spanish? Baratijas? Ornamentos. Exacto, baratijas. Bisutería. Bisutería, estimado. Perfect. Trinket. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so okay, trinket. Okay, trinket. Bisutería. So any trinket attached to a keychain. Oh, holy fuck, trinket, bro. Trinket, that word. Trinket lets you run and write code in any browser. Trinket. Code is your canvas. Trinket. Okay. Think Java. Here we go. No. Chill. Okay, so trinket. Interesting. So that's what a fob means. Fob refers to a trinket. Why they don't call trinket? That's a good question. But now it refers this fob to this small trinket attached to a keychain. Okay, that's what they call is key fob. Okay. Oh my god. Holy fuck. Okay, possession, inheriting, and knowledge. Multi-factor authentication, time, location, something you have, something you are, something you know. So by the end of the day, it is about this, right? So the whole point of this is you have now a dedicated hardware that generate now tokens that generate interval of tokens. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So instead of having your device compromised to do so, you have now a specific hardware or key fob that generates now tokens, or that generate is, that generate tokens. That generate tokens. Are those tokens based on time? Okay, unlike traditional password-only system, MFS require more than one method of authentication to verify a user identity before they can access any of these assets. These factors are as follow: possession, inherit, and knowledge. So something that you know, okay, something that you have, and something that you are. Right? The use of such simple factors make it difficult for bad actors to steal or compromise credential or harm the company in other ways. But again, okay, the passcode only works for a certain amount of time, 30 to 60 seconds. If the user fails to input this passcode into the system within this period, it automatically times out and they won't be able to use it again. To access the system or service, they need to regenerate. But that's the whole point of this, right? That's the whole idea of this key fob. Okay. Llaves de llavero. Or llaveritos in Spanish. You know, llaveritos. Okay. Jesus, that's a lot. Okay, makes a lot of sense. So here, this is not hardware key fob, right? Because they're not generating any token. This is just use. Okay. I do think that this is much more useful in financial assets and stuff like that, right? Rather than this. I mean, this is, if you own that, this might be your first layer. This might be your first layer on top of that. Okay. Yeah, this might be your first layer on top of that. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. So again, all this strategy is based on all of these are defensive mechanisms in your apps to determine who can have access to your AWS infrastructure. So IAM allow you to do this, and so IAM allow you to create users, create groups, define policies. I also look at how to do so. These policies are describing it's a JSON object. It's a format that first you have the versions and some identifiers, and then the set of statements that describe is the actions, if you're allowed based on an effect to have access to this resource to perform these actions. And you can define several of those statements. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. So once you do that, right, now it is time to guarantee that those users have access to a resource in a secure way. So we have several of them, but we have main two at least in AWS, right? The first two is the password policy. So you enforce certain rules that this user must abide to. The second is this defensive mechanism, multi-factor authentication. So the idea is that something that you own, something that you are, and something that you have is a way of how you can identify a user. All right. And whether it's using virtual using virtual MFS, using virtual MFA, or UTB, universal security key, or universal second factor, all right, which is this trinket, right? Trinket, right? Is this trinket that you can is the string key that you hold in your keychains. All right. So the UTF is at least the second security layer that you must have, right? And the other is more advanced solutions. So, for example, for corporations or government, where now their assets are at risk. So, hardware key fob, for example, is this specialized hardware that generates now tokens that generates now tokens. That is a very, very interesting stuff to do so here. Specialized hardware, man. Specialized hardware, bro. So after all, I look at how to do so, and how can users access AWS? All right. Okay, so the different so how you users can access to AWS, whether it's using access key, the CLI, or the SDK. All right. So in my right now, because I'm offering my services to this particular company, okay, they host they use AWS to host their own infrastructure, all right, for a particular product in the real estate market. And now I'm going to have access to the resource. I already have a role. I already have a user, right? And the way how can I have access to their services is whether it's by access key, the CLI, or the SDK. So by access key, so access key are generated through the AWS console. Users manage their own access key, and access key are secret, just like a password, so don't share it. Access key, you can think of this as their username, and secret access key is your password. Example of fake access key, for example, like this. And remember, don't share your access key. So what's the AWS CLI? Is again another surface area that allows you to have access to their AWS services via console. All right, so you direct access to the public API or AWS service, so you can develop script to manage your resource. It is open source and it's an alternative to using the AWS management console, like the web UI. Okay, and then you have now programmatically. So what's an AWS SDK here? So here I look at how to set up the AWS CLI on Windows, Mac, and Linux. AWS CLI has hands-on to create your own access key. This is something that was generated for me. Okay, so my access key, bro. Holy moly. So my access key, bro. So my access key, bro. Okay, how can I generate is those access key okay. And once I set the configurations in the CLI, now I can have access to, based on that key. In that key, I attach that key to a particular user. All right. So to create my own key, so I'm in the user, and then on the security credentials, I create now a key, the access key, that it allowed me to do so, right? To generate that key. And there you got it, right? But it's but it's in fact, come on. Okay, no problem. Exactly. Per user, you can generate is this AWS CLI. Per user, you can have, so per user you have all of this access to. Okay, an AWS CloudShell. So just to show that you can use a web-based cloud that is available to certain regions for illustrative purpose, if AWS CLI work for you, great. Okay, this is also another service that they provide, AWS CloudShell, which is similar to AWS CLI. They already set up that so you can have access via your browser that cluster. Virtual private cloud. It provides you a repo to host files and download it. I don't know how much it changed. I don't know how much it charge. Okay. So after I know the different entry points in the AWS infrastructure, whether it is by an access key or an via CLI or the SDK. Okay, so whether it's web, okay, whether it's the web, the CLI, or programmatically, okay. Now I'm looking is at another component of the IAM, which is roles. So unlike users and unlike permissions that allow you to define is what a users can have, now roles allow you to define what service. So think of like AWS services like a lanyard. Okay, holding a badge describing permissions. Role are permission that we give to AWS services to do stuff on AWS. Exactly. So, okay, so users, so you can define permissions per users at the user level or at the group level, but you can also define is now permissions at the role level, which is used for services, AWS services. Some AWS services will need to be performed actions on your behalf, right? So I am a role that I want to have access to. Okay. Roles and permission that give the AWS access to EC2 instance virtual service and AWS this, and you get this. Some AWS service will need to perform actions on your behalf. To do so, we will assign permission to AWS services with IAM roles. And common roles are EC2 instance roles. So hey, I allow I allow this service. So I grant these services. I grant this service to have access to. So there's okay. I allow to have access to this service based on these conditions. Okay. EC2 instance role, Lambda functions, and role for cloud formation. Okay. That'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.